that are making the most absurd claims about Alatra and its participants.
We stand for the inherent rights of human life.
Everyone is working together to bring this information to the table for free.
And so when you're investigating the historical aspect of climate change and whether or not it's cyclical,
Because it's become a political topic, because it's become a conspiracy topic.
and investigate yourself, the main thing is to use critical thinking.
All right, folks, welcome to the podcast. My name is Steve, and I am here with my friend Jason. And today we're going to be talking about the Alatra International Public Movement, as well as concepts and values of freedom and democracy. Who is directly opposing the Alatra International Public Movement, some climate-related things, and goals of the movement, etc. Jason, how you doing today, man? What's going on?
Pretty good. Excited to dive in this topic. I'm glad to be talking with you about it, especially an issue or issues that are very important to me.
Yeah, man. I think we can, especially everybody at Alatra, our values are very closely aligned. We all want to see the world become a better place. And we work tremendously hard to be the best team that we can be and share these values with the world and bring up some super, super important topics that if you're a human, you can relate to, such as, uh, making sure that all humans are living comfortably, making sure democratic values get upheld so our voices are heard, and making sure that we have the most freedom as humans as we possibly can have. So I think what we'll do today is just clear some of the air. There's a lot of nonsense running around about Alatra and its participants. So we certainly have to speak to that. We have to speak to who's behind it. But maybe first, why don't we share a little bit of our experience as Alatra participants?
Yeah, I can go right into that. So I have been a participant of the Alatra International Public Movement for about 5 years now, give or take. In 2019, I had heard about the movement, its initiatives, and the information that was presented regarding climate change, which is discussed on the new About page. So, as I was saying, I've been a participant for about 5 years, and the evidences that were discussed by the Alatra International Public Movement regarding climate and the necessity to unite humanity and to involve all of our scientists, theoretical and practical scientific fields, in order to produce a solution for humanity, as well as the timeline and how climate will be changing at an exponential rate and life on Earth will be difficult. Which was pretty new at that time because most people or most organizations were just discussing the terrific aspects of climate change, right? Or how we had to just adjust behavior, but it didn't feel right. So, Steve, that's it. That's essentially it in a nutshell. How long my personal experience of being an Alatra participant, but there are a few aspects actually I want to share a little bit more of, besides the climate aspect. Ever since I've been a participant, no one has ever asked me to do anything that I didn't want to do. No one has told me you must do this or you must share information this way, right? Essentially, in my experience with people all over the world, and I've worked with probably there's about 180 different countries that participate in the Alatra International Public Movement, and I've worked with probably 90 different countries, people of different dialects, ethnicities, religious beliefs, atheistic. It doesn't matter. And the common theme was is if you were inspired to share the truth with people, then you would investigate that truth or your hypothesis of that truth, and you would work together, do the facts, do a literary analysis, research analysis, whatever. And then you would consult with experts in that field of that subject. And then you would deliver that information on the Alatra TV channel, which was so significant for me at that time because if you want to find information, you're essentially working for someone's agenda. And Alatra was completely different than that. You know, there was no money involved in what I wanted to do or what the people who worked with me wanted to do. And for me, that was a big motivator and provided a lot of the enthusiasm for my participation and delivering information to people. Um, because the climate aspect can be it is gloomy, right? Like it's not this glamorous subject to talk about, but it's our reality, and people couldn't make a choice without being informed, right? Like that's just reality. You can't make a
Yeah.
choice on what you want to do unless you're informed. So I'd love to hear what your experience has been with the movement as well.
Yeah, man. I definitely want to get into a little bit more about like the dynamics of how we work as groups and individuals, and kind of the like you mentioned,
I mean,
like
even this podcast now, right? Like,
yeah, literally, like guys, you know, we're both operating as Alatra participants right now. I just got off of work, right? Like no one's paying me to sit on this podcast. Like we organized this on our own time with the team that's taking care of all the technical stuff. Like we just had fun with the lighting and, you know, a bunch of audio nonsense that we were trying to deal with. And it's simply because we're trying to get the truth out to people. And I think that in the days of misinformation, there is, or just information in general, there is such a need for people to be the source of information. And what do I mean by that? I mean that we don't get anything out of this other than really, let's say nothing material. We don't get status, we don't get fame, we don't get paid, we don't, you know, like our material life doesn't get directly benefited. So as participants, we're here to just share what's been going on in terms of the climate situation, share more about the project, because I don't think, you know, if you browse a lot of the content, there aren't really participants that are sitting down, at least until recently, right? That are sitting down and just talking about our experience. And we'll get into the reason of this massive misinformation campaign, where it's coming out of, and why they're actually doing it. And it goes into a much, much, much larger picture than just an attack on Alatra, right? It's an attack on democratic values, and essentially an attempt to bring in some form of world totalitarian regime. And when we really zoom out and we look at it on from a holistic picture, people will find out by the end of this series that it will eventually affect them, and where these values are actually coming from, where these methods of manipulation were actually learned from. And then people can make their own decision based on these facts, confirm them for themselves, and see if, you know, the people that are doing this sort of stuff, if those values are the world that they want to live in. Right. So I think it might be a good idea to go ahead and share my screen here. It's a volunteer driven initiative that unites participants from over 180 countries, right? And the main goal of the public movement is to study climate and geodynamic changes happening across the planet. Now, I think people immediately, right, like the conspiracy hats come on, the political agendas start to swarm people from the right and the left. And we immediately, like, we create this formed conclusion about what this situation really is. And because it's become this whole like political thing, it's it becomes an emotionally charged topic, right? But I think the reality of our situation is you can look outside your window. I'll give you guys just an example here. I lived on the East Coast of the United States my entire life. It's been 33 years. Okay. In the last 3 months, and mind you, these are things that I have never witnessed in my life where I live. The sky was red. That's one of them. Um, Flash floods destroyed multiple nature preserves and swept houses away with it. Okay, and we also experienced the shock waves of a category 4.8, 4.9, possibly over a 5, because there were certain reports that actually wound up disappearing as a day or two went on. But I saw as high as a 5.2 reported just inside Pennsylvania, and I felt the shock waves. I'm all the way on the coast, where I was actually laying down to take a nap, and I felt my entire house starting to vibrate underneath me. I'm like, okay, well, this is what an earthquake feels like. And mind you, in all of my time of living here, I've never seen any of those things, right? And when we go into the mathematical model of the Alatra scientists and how they said that based off the progression, that we would really start to see significant changes come this year and next year. Granted, it's been slowly ramping up, but now all you guys have to do is I mean, honestly, TikTok is a great place to see a lot of these disasters happening across the world. And as I mentioned, because it's become a political topic, because it's become a conspiracy topic, people just want to throw out the first thing that comes to their mind, deny everything else. Meanwhile, the greatest part about having volunteers in 180 countries, all independently studying this thing so that we can get our own picture, coming together and forming a holistic picture from all of these studied backgrounds and realizing, holy shit, like we're in some serious trouble here, right? And this is just coming from regular people, again, volunteers. And at the same time, because there is a whole slew of scientists from different backgrounds, from different professions, studying this sort of stuff on their own and then communicating with one another, we can actually get to the bottom of it. You know why? Because it's not about selling vegetarian meat. It's not about charging for carbon tax. It's not about, whatever, agendas that you hear about. It's just about people wanting to know what's going on. Right. And when you have something that's by the people, it's always going to be for the people. Right. And that's essentially a democratic process, is people having their opinions, having their life experiences, and making the decisions based off of all of this stuff combined into one, right, into one process. And that general understanding becomes the general consensus, right? So we'll go down this just a little bit, right? And it's brought together by independent nonprofit organizations, informal volunteer groups, as you mentioned before, and individual activists, right, operating outside of politics and outside of religion, right? And we'll get to this whole religious standpoint a little bit later on, but as you mentioned before, there's no external funding, right? And there is no representatives of specific governmental interests, right? So what, in your experience, what are some things that you heard in regards to, this sort of topic from people outside that don't participate in the movement?
So that's a great question, Steve. And there's been a number of things that I've encountered over the course of 4 years. And up until this point, I've actually avoided addressing any of them until the release of this website, this new about page about Alatra. And the reason being is because once you participate in Alatra, you end up knowing for yourself, right? Like there it's comprised of people who utilize critical thinking, okay? Not one person in the group believes something someone tells them and just like, oh, that's just automatically factual. And so one of the misconceptions that have been framed by the anti-cult organizations, and we'll discuss Ratzinger and Alexander Dvorkin a little bit later, but one of the things that is put out there and framed in a way to drive a specific opinion into people's minds is that we're not free associated people, that we have some leader. That's the number one thing, because it's
George
like,
Soros.
yeah, in our mind, as far as like organizing society. So the sociological aspect of our interaction and our social contracts, people can't imagine that you can just go to your neighbor's house and help your neighbor do something unless there's an emergency. Well, if that helps people to think about it that way, it is an emergency, right? That's the climate emergency right now. And the information presented by the scientists who came together in the 90s had led to the creation of the Alatra movement, which is discussed on the page. And that emergency propelled people to work together and discuss this information with the public. Okay. Because what was realized pretty fast is the government wasn't going to do it, right? As long as there was monetary interest of individuals, it wasn't going to happen. So the only way to do it would be people who are leading from the front with complete autonomy, right? That was the only way it was going to work. And that's what brings us here now. So that's one framing that's done, is that, oh, yeah, there's got to be some leadership. No, every person exercises personal autonomy. That's something people truly need to understand. Number two is, as you said, the external funding. I've had to address this misconception many times. If I have an extra dollar, I put it into the project I want to work on. Okay, it's that simple. Equipment is purchased by those that are actively participating or want to participate in the project. And as much as it'll blow people's mind, there's no one that's keeping track. Oh, well, Johnny spent this, Susie spent that, Jason spent that, as like some leverage for opportunity or decision-making processes. No, the people who have enthusiasm to work on a specific project, they do what they can. And if they can't, then they implement their talents. Meaning if they don't have the monetary aspects, then they utilize their talents. And that's discussed on the webpage as well. So those are probably the two biggest misconceptions that have to be addressed. The third one is the aspect of politics, and many people don't understand why we keep saying we're outside of politics. We don't have a bias towards any policy, any polity, or any institution. We stand for the inherent rights of human life. It's really that simple. So anything and everything that goes against the value of human life or a person's personal autonomy, then we share information about those different aspects and deliver that information on Alatra TV. And that's why, going to a fourth point, is the wide array of subjects and material that is found on Alatra TV is because there's not just Jason on this lonely blue planet and his interest. And that really is one of the biggest ones that are used as an argument by the anti-cultists to be like, oh, well, see, they just it's like a paintball, right? They just scattershot in all these directions. No, dudes, there's 8 billion people on this planet and we have different interests. We have different hobbies. There are things that I'm interested in learning about that other people aren't. And there are things other people are interested in learning about that I'm not, as well as the information you come into contact with when you're investigating, right? So let's take a step back. If there's people in 180 different countries, then inherently right off the rip, there's 180 different languages. Okay. There's 180 different cultures, and that's just using a baseline. And so when you're investigating the historical aspect of climate change and whether or not it's cyclical, which is discussed at length in the hypothesis of the mathematical model, you're going to come across other interesting information, and you're going to want to share that information because the platform is free to people. Right. And people have an inherent right to information. I don't have a hegemony over information, and neither do you, and neither does anyone who's assisting us and organizing this podcast right now. No, information is for all people. And, Steve, let's in the next episode dive into a little bit more about the climate report and what happened in 2014 and why there was a necessity to share more
that are
information.
making the
Yeah.
most
Yeah,
absurd
absolutely.
claims about
You know,
Alatra and its
there's a lot to
participants.
cover here, but I really like
We
that you
stand for the
brought up,
inherent rights of
Alatra
human
TV and
life.
Everyone
the
is
ways,
working
the
together
reasons
to
why
bring this
so many other
information to the
topics wound up
table
getting
for
discussed,
free.
and the
Absolutely. And so
people's
when you're
freedom and
investigating
ability to share the
the
information
historical
they came
aspect of
across
climate change
themselves.
and whether or not it's
And that's one of
cyclical,
the things that
Because
really
it's become a
attracted
political
me
topic,
most
because it's
to the
become a project,
conspiracy
because
topic.
and investigate
I
yourself.
was
The
I
main
was that
thing
kind of
is
kid, like
to use
sitting
critical
in high
thinking.
school, like with my head down, like, why do I need to know any of this stuff? Like, just really like not interested in a lot of things. But when you start to, you can feel like, oh, they like this project is like on one screen, there's like a person that might be from the US, right? And then on the other screen, there's somebody that's from Italy. And like on another screen there's someone from another country, and all of a sudden all of these people are bringing this research all together into one presentation. And it's such a cool thing because we're either regular people or people within specific fields, and everyone is working together to bring this information to the table for free so that all people can learn about this stuff, and most importantly, what is going on with our planet right now and the cyclical process that is going on right now. And all of that information brought about by an interdisciplinary research project that essentially started this whole thing, right? And this is going all the way back to the 1990s. And here we are in 2024, after all of these years of research with an extremely in-depth climate report with open sources that people can confirm for themselves. This isn't like some stuff that was made up out of thin air. And this stuff is finally being shared, and it's not being hidden, even though there are those that are trying to suppress this information, and for reasons that we will go on into a future episode with. But I think this was, a good intro to exactly how the people, the participants of Alatra are participating, the fact that we are doing it on our own initiative, and how important the information is that we are sharing. And maybe we can go into a little bit more about, as you mentioned, the climate report, what it actually means for humanity, and then maybe dive into a little bit of the smear campaign of what's been going on over the last, like, granted 10 years, but within the last like 2 or 3 weeks we're seeing almost 200, 240, 300 different journalistic writings that are making the most absurd claims about Alatra and its participants. So we'll definitely clear the air on some of that stuff in the future episode.
Yeah,
Appreciate you
Steve, thank you
sticking
so
there.
much for bringing up this topic. And guys, be sure to like, comment, follow, chop up the episodes, and share them with people that are interested in similar topics as you. And investigate yourself. The main thing is to use critical thinking. Don't
That
accept
right there.
something someone has said, and investigate it yourself. And you'll find that there's a lot of interesting information out there that isn't shared on other platforms. So we encourage you to do that. And until next time, be
Thanks,
safe.
brother. Appreciate it.